Hi, welcome to Ms. Cooper's art class. Today I'm going to show you how to draw noses without a reference photo or just a little bit better with a reference photo. So let me tell you about the materials I'm using today. Today I'm using a Prismacolor ebony pencil. You can see what it looks like here, and I'm using one with a pointy tip for some of my detailed drawings, and then I have one with a more rounded tip just to help with some shading. So let's start by talking about the shape of the nose because this is meant to teach you how to draw a variety of noses. And the first thing that you want to think about are the handlebars, I like to call them, at the bottom of the nose. So this is the outline of the bottom of the nose and the nostrils. So some noses are very flat, whereas others have a bit more of a point at the bottom and a more dramatic shape. So I noted some examples. Some of them are flat, some of them are a little bit pointier. And you start this by drawing that little U shape at the bottom, which is where the tip of the nose is, and then you bring it up into those handlebars to get the place where the nostrils are. And so this area is the part that's going to have the shading for your nostrils, and you can see it looks a bit like a handlebar. You have to figure out the height of this, right? If it's flat or not, and how the nostrils are angled, if it's asymmetrical or not. Mine is slightly asymmetrical. And then you do the parentheses, which I noted off to the side. So some people have very curved parentheses shapes on the sides of their noses, and some of them have some that are more straight. So if you have a reference photo, just pay close attention and note the variety of shapes you could have. Now, when it comes to shading your nose, the rest of the nose pretty much is made out of shading and shouldn't be outlined if you're looking for realism. So if I draw the handlebars, nostrils, and parentheses, instead of adding some straight lines to the side of the nose, because that doesn't look realistic at all, what I want to do instead is build it up with shading, because really the rest of your nose is represented through some subtle changes in value and skin color. So I'm going to show you a good example of drawing my handlebars with my nostrils, then adding my parentheses. I'm going with very hooked at the bottom one and then much straighter at the top. I'm using my pointy pencil for this part, and then I'm going to build up shading very slowly along the sides of my nose. So although it starts with a bit of an outline, I'm going to actually use my dull pencil to fill in the rest. And I sped this up here to give you a better idea of what this could look like without you having to take tons of time here. So I'm going to start by shading the sides, and then I'll go around the parentheses because there will be a shadow there, because that's where your nose connects to the rest of your face more sharply. I also darkened it a bit in one part to kind of show the bottom of the cheek in a very dramatic way. Now let's look at how to shade the tip of the nose. So if you look at the structure of the nose, there's basically three little balls or spheres, each with their own highlight at the bottom of the nose. There's one at the tip of your nose that sticks out more, and then there are two that are by the parentheses that kind of support that and further push it into the air off of your face. So what you want to do is think of each one as its own little ball or sphere and do some shading, some little curved shadows to outline those. So I have one at the tip of my nose, and now I'm shading one of the ones that's by my parentheses, by my nostrils. So you'll want to go very light with the shading first. If you go very dramatic, it'll make the tip of the nose look extremely pointy. So I'd recommend start slowly and then gradually build it up. So I barely put any at the tip of the nose, but you see how that makes it look like the tip of the nose sticks out a little farther than the nostrils? That's why we think of those three little spheres at the bottom. That's what's going to help us with the shading. So now I've sped up, adding a bit more shading, starting to make the nose look a little pointier, and now I'm adding some shading at the bottom of the nose. This is what's going to help it pop out from the face. And I'm making this up here because I don't have a reference photo. What you will need a reference photo for is the philtrum. That's that area between the nose and the lips. So I did very minimal shading there. That's just going to depend on the person and on the lighting. Now I'm adding some darker shading, and if I were to leave it like this, that's going to be too sharp. It makes the nose look a little bit fake, like maybe they have a lot of makeup on, kind of contouring the nose. But if I take that shading and start to smooth it out a bit, that's going to bring it back to some realism. So I would do that a bit more if I was trying to make this look more realistic, or I would just be more subtle in the first place, like the example below it. So that's the front view. Let's talk about the side view of the nose in case you're drawing someone in profile. So there are a couple shapes you should note. Some people have very straight noses. Some people's curve in. Some people's go out and then back in. That's actually what mine does. And then it might just kind of go out in a little bump. You also want to think about the angle. Does their nose tilt upwards in space and you can see a lot of their nostrils? Does it go straight out? Does it just point down? Those are all things to note so that you don't draw someone with whatever you consider a typical nose if that doesn't make sense on their face. So let's look at some examples here. You'll also note I drew some circles already to think about those little spheres at the bottom of your nose because that affects the shading from the side view as well. So let's talk about really kind of the basic motions for this. There are a couple things you want to outline when you're figuring out the side of the nose. The first one is that kind of profile, I'll call it, just the overall shape of it. Then there's the nostril. How big is it? What angle is it tilted at? How close is it to the profile? And then the parentheses. What shape is that? Is it straight? Is it very curvy? Is it flat? Is it small? Is it close to the nostril? Those are other things to consider. So the profile, the nostril, and then the singular parentheses. And then we want to think about how we're shading it, again, with those little spheres at the bottom. So I'll draw a profile real quick. I'm going to draw one that's a little bit more like mine. It kind of goes out in a bump, and then it goes back in, and then it goes out again. And I made this one just a little bit more dramatic than mine looks. Now I'm going to add the nostril, and I'm taking care to make sure it's at the correct angle. And now I'm going to add the singular parenthesis. And so I've got my outline here. I didn't connect it back to any other part of the face yet. Let's just think about shading. And I did accidentally do this part off camera, so I'm going to zip on through that, but I promise you I did pay attention to the shading here of the two balls, but I will show you another one in just a second here. Okay, you can see where that landed. I kept it really basic once I realized it wasn't on camera, so you can see the overall outline of those two ball shapes still. I'll do another example one. So again, think of your two circles that you can see. Kind of do a curved shadow for the underside of each one. That's what's going to separate them from the rest of the face and from each other. And then you'll want some shading next to the nose where it connects to the face because the nose will put a shadow on the face. I didn't blend that one, just so you can see what I was thinking about. We have some blended examples at the top. But now I'm just going to do one a little bit slower and with some more blending in case you would like to see that. So now I'm outlining a very straight nose. I think I'm going to have mine point down just a little bit just because I can. And there's such a wonderful variety of noses out there that I can kind of do whatever I want for this video, which is great. I'm going to add the nostril, and then I'm slowly going to add a parentheses. So I have this nose that is very straight and it's pointed down. I'll make my nostril really nice and dark. And then I'll start darkening my parenthesis because that kind of forms the one side of the ball. And it's where the nose comes out from the face. So we'll naturally have a shadow there. And if the person has some really interesting or pronounced cheeks or wrinkles, it'll be even darker. And then the side of the nose will have a shadow as well since it shadows itself from the light. I'll continue building up some shading on the side of the ball, and now I'm looking at the ball that makes the tip of the nose as well, so I'm adding my shading there too. And now I'm just really going through the process of smoothing it out and darkening it. I'm using little feather tipping motions with my pencil, but really you could use any material to shade noses. This is something you could think about when you're painting, when you're drawing with ballpoint pen or charcoal or really anything else. Got some shading underneath the nose. It's basic shading. If I was using a reference photo, I'd look more carefully. And then I left the top of the nose blank, so there would be a highlight. Please note that when you're doing highlights on the top of the nose, some noses go in, and there's actually maybe a slight bit of a shadow not like a shadow, just not really a bright highlight either. It's going to be a little darker, whereas noses that go out into space more are going to be a bit lighter, typically. If you don't have a reference photo, these are some good rules of thumb. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope this is helpful for when you're drawing noses without a reference photo. I'd recommend practicing a whole variety of noses because there are so many kinds of noses out there, and you should really try to practice them all. Thank you so much for watching, and happy drawing!